My name is Satish Kathula. I'm an oncologist from Dayton, Ohio, president of API. And we are doing this type topic today with title Meteoric Rise of Transformers and Uses of AI in Healthcare. And Dr. Alok Agarwal kindly agreed to do this talk. And AI has become a buzzword, and wherever you see there is a lot of talk about AI, and we thought it would be a good talk for all of us to learn what AI is, what it can do, what is the future of AI. So to enlighten us, Dr. Alok Agarwal is here. And CME Chair, Dr. Amit Goel will introduce Dr. Alok Agarwal. So this is the second webinar, CME webinar we are doing. We are planning to do about 12 total this year, monthly, twice, typically on second and fourth Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. EST. So Dr. Goel, so please take over
Yeah.
with the CME.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Katula. Yeah, welcome everyone for another round of RP webinar. And again, we are just brainstorming some of the topics that we can just learn a little bit more, and nothing better than artificial intelligence that we need to learn around, because again, this is something that is part of our lives everywhere around us and in our healthcare system as well. And this is the future of medicine and for us as a mankind. So it gives me a pleasure to introduce Dr. Alok Agarwal, who is our speaker today. And he received his bachelor's degree in technology at IIT Delhi in 1980, and PhD after that, and multiple other education, including some stay at MIT. And then he built a supply chain management solution, joined the strategy department of IBM Research Division, co-founded EvalueServe, which sort of provided research, analytics, and consulting services to clients worldwide, and then founded Scry Analytics, which is now called Scry AI, and is well published with almost 120 research articles, 8 patents, and pretty much a very well-rounded, I would say, individual. And he's a CEO and chief data scientist of Scry AI at San Jose, California. So, Dr. Agarwal, welcome, and please take it on. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. The talk will be probably around 40 minutes, and after that we can have questions. And if it goes beyond the hour, it's entirely up to the audience. You can continue asking me questions. So a portion of the talk is going to be about history, about AI, because I think that's as important as what's happening today and what will happen, more importantly, probably tomorrow or day after. In this regard, there is a very famous saying by a science fiction writer in 1950s. His name was Arthur C. Clarke. He had 3 laws, and his third law said, any sufficiently advanced technology is considered magic by humans. That is certainly true about AI right now, especially because AI started in effect in 1950. So I wrote a book because there is so much hype, there is so much snake oil being sold about AI, there is so much mystification or mystifying happening. The book is called The Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI, 1950 to 2050. And I'll come to why 1950. It's available on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon, both in Kindle, very soon in Audible, and so on. It is meant for people who are not in computer science or mathematicians. Hopefully, my talk will not be to computer scientists or mathematicians, but to people like you who understand things on a scientific level, at a very general level, but do not want to go and do not need to go into the depths. And if I do not achieve that, then it's completely my fault, both in the book and in today's talk. Please do ask me questions. Once write them down, or if you have a chat, then put them in chat, and would be happy to answer every and each question that you folks may have. With that, and I'll come to what is transformers in a minute, hopefully everyone can see. If you have any questions about the ability to see or hear me, please raise your hand. We can fix it right now. Otherwise, I'll jump right into the talk. See, 4 people have in chat. Hopefully, okay, hopefully it will not, it's not, okay. So in 1950, Professor Alan Turing, or Dr. Alan Turing, he was a mathematician at heart, and he had already helped allies win the war, or at least portion of the war, by decrypting cryptographic codes coming from Germany. So this was 1940 to 1945. And if you haven't seen a biopicture for Alan Turing, I would strongly recommend this as one of the movies to see. I'll talk about a couple of other movies as time goes by. The Imitation Game. The reason the movie is called The Imitation Game, it very briefly describes it. But this was the question posed in a research paper by Alan Turing. He said, suppose there is a computer sitting in one room and there is a man sitting in another. Remember, this is 1950, so even semiconductors were not there. The first computer that came out in 1945, ENIAC, was made essentially of incandescent bulbs, the same bulbs that we use today for lighting our houses. Those bulbs were used then also for lighting houses, but because these fuse quite easily, they had taken to fuse them less often. They had taken out air out of these bulbs, and therefore they were called vacuum tubes. So computers were at that time very, very, very primitive in 1950. And he asked the following question. There is a computer sitting in one room, man sitting in another, judge sitting in the third room. They cannot see each other. The computer is talking to the judge via cable, and so is the man. Can the computer imitate the man so that the judge is fooled into believing that it is actually the man? So in other words, is it possible for the computer to imitate the man? And this is often called, this came to be called as the imitation game, and is also in computer science called the Turing test. We're still far away from the Turing test, but most of this talk, directly or indirectly, will talk, not all, but a substantial portion will be about Turing test. Can a computer imitate man in terms of language? So the equally interesting was the next after 2 years, BBC interviewed him, and they said, look, what do you think? When do you think these kinds of computers would exist? Because we are so far away. And his view was not for at least 100 years. And that's partly why the book is 1950 to 2050. Then the next question was equally interesting and equally important. And we will touch upon this very, very crucially and quite often during this talk. The BBC interviewer asked him, how do you think these computers would be made? And he said, we will have to train these computers just like we train our children. So you take a 2-year-old, you show the 2-year-old, this is a dog, this is a cat, you show enough of that, and the 2-year-old gets trained to differentiate between dogs and cats. Similarly, you perhaps train a 3 or a 4-year-old, 2 plus 2 equals 4, and that's because 2 equals 1 plus 1, then the second is 2 is also 1 plus 1, and that's why 4. 4 plus 5 equals 9, again you put it in ones. 4 plus 6 doesn't equal 11, so you give some positive and some negative ways of training children. And that was his thought process, and that is what he used to call child machines. Interestingly, that's exactly how we train most of our AI systems today. Most of the machine learning today happens as child machines, and it's often called supervised machine learning. So this happened in 1952. Unfortunately, because of various circumstances, Alan Turing passed away. But during that period, there was quite a bit of research happening even in the US. And one of the pioneers, Marvin Minsky, had created an electronic rat, but using again these vacuum tubes, that could find a cheese in a 4x4 maze. So a lot of research, or a lot of people were thinking along the same lines. Professor John McCarthy in Dartmouth wrote a proposal to National Science Foundation asking for some money to hold a conference in Dartmouth in 1955 to explore ways that a machine can reason like a human, capable of abstract thought and problem solving, and it could improve on its own. So he, in fact, went one step further that not only uh, can it be trained like child machines, like children, then once they become older, gradually they're also improving on their own. And that's the time when, in his proposal, he actually coined the term artificial intelligence, which basically was all about exploring ways that a machine could reason like a human, capable of abstract thought, problem solving, and self improvement. We are in 2023, 24 these days. We are still far away from what the pioneers at that time thought about machines. Just to differentiate what was happening in 1950, a typical computer program is often called an algorithm, and an algorithm is just a set of rules for solving a problem. So, for example, if you ask me how to add n numbers, n could be 100, n could be 1,000, I would say one of the ways of solving it is in the ith step, add the ith number to the sum that you have achieved so far. So in the first step, you have no sum. You have the first number. In the second step, the sum is the first number. You add the second number. In the third step, it's the third number that you're adding to the sum, which is of first two numbers, and so on. So it's a set of business rules, basically, which do not change over time, which do not change with data. And this has been going on for 4,500 years before Alan Turing gave this interesting thought. The reason the word algorithm came because of a Persian who actually studied a lot of Hindu numerals and Hindu mathematics at that time and gave the first algorithm to solve quadratic equations. His name was Al-Khwarizmi. Unfortunately, in Latin, Al-Khwarizmi became algorithmy, and then in English, it became algorithm. So that's how you will hear a lot about algorithms. Algorithms in general, classic algorithms are a set of business rules to solve a problem, as opposed to machine learning algorithms, which are child machines, which are either being taught by somebody or they're improving on their own, which is often called reinforcement learning. And we will not go into reinforcement learning at this point. So how do these child machines work today, or have been working since Alan Turing and John McCarthy came up with these beautiful notions? So I'll give you an example, very, very simple example, but we can then extend it to examples in healthcare. So suppose somebody came to me and said, look, I have 1 million pictures of faces of dogs and cats, and I would request you to partition them into two groups, one of dogs and one of cats. Now, one way of my doing it is get probably 10 or 20 10-year-old or 8-year-old kids and give them some way, attract them to do this menial work and say, hey, please partition it. That's one way of doing it. Another is I get together with a person who is a subject matter expert and who knows the features that differentiate faces of dogs and cats. For example, and I'm not an expert, but some of the features could be cats have whiskers, dogs do not. Cats have more rounded faces, dogs have more conical faces. Dogs have droopy ears, and so on and so forth. So these are often called features or internal variables. Now, using those set of features, I actually write an algorithm, which will change itself, and we'll talk about how it changes itself. I write an algorithm taking these features into account, and for the time being, we'll call it a black box algorithm because I don't want to discuss too much about the math behind the algorithm. So the first input comes to it, and suppose it's a face of a dog. And I ask this time, rather than asking these kids to label all the million faces, I'll ask them to label only 10,000, and I'll use 9,000 to train this child machine. So the first input comes in, and it's the face of a dog. And this black box algorithm also says it's a face of a dog. No, there is no error, it's correct. So nothing changes in this black box. The second input comes in. Again, let's say it's a face of a dog, but it outputs as a face of a cat. So what happens is the error is fed back saying, look, it was a face of a cat, which was labeled by one of these kids, and you're saying it's a face of a dog, so you need to change yourself. And the black box algorithm, just like what probably happens in humans or rats and mice and C. elegans and all the other animals with potentially brains and nervous systems and neurons, it changes itself so that the same input, which was a face of a dog, or face of a cat, sorry, now actually becomes the correct output. So no longer is it saying for the same input a dog, but it's saying cat. Again, a face of a dog comes in, it outputs cat, it again changes it accordingly. So something is changing in it, and we'll go into a bit of a detail as to what is changing in it in a minute. But I do it for about 9,000 such pictures. If there were enough features that were given to me by the subject matter expert who could differentiate, who could tell me whiskers and rounded eyes are some things which are very, very crucial to cat faces and droopy ears to dog faces, etc., then this algorithm, this black box algorithm will become pretty accurate, about 90% accurate, as long as my features are that were given to me are good. So this is supervised learning because there is somebody supervising it, or like a parent training a child. And here, of course, it was one of the kids which was supervising it indirectly without realizing. Why am I discussing this is because there is so much hype. The first question, I think all of us, when people come to me, and I've been doing it as Dr. Amit Govill said, I've been doing this since 1983. Somebody comes to me and say, can AI do this? My first question is, can human do it? Can an average person, or not even an average person, an educated person do it? Because today, if a human cannot do it, the likelihood is very, very high that a machine, a child machine, or an AI system will not be able to. Yes, it can find more patterns. It may be able to, after it's learned a lot. I mean, we will come to that later on, but it is possible that I gave it, because the subject matter expert gave me 20 features which differentiated dogs and cat faces. Maybe it figures out in the whole process a 21st feature also. But it is very unlikely that it will be able to fundamentally solve a problem that a human today can. Now, can this happen in 2050, 2060? Potentially. But today there is no way, because most of these machines are being supervised by humans. And we'll talk a bit more about its advantages and disadvantages of being supervised by humans, that AI system can solve anything more than humans. It may be more accurate. It may have figured out more patterns, but it cannot fundamentally solve anything which humans cannot solve. What is going on in the black box? So in 1938, this notion of neurons, which basically have a nucleus, they have an axon by which a neuron would send the signal forward. It's connected to other neurons, and on the back side or on the other side, it's connected to dendrites, where it's getting the signals from other neurons. And depending on this neuron and how strongly it's connected to the other neuron from where it's getting a signal, that strength is kind of a weight on that particular edge or on that particular connection between the two neurons. So that signal gets multiplied by that weight or that strength of the connection, and you add up all these weighted signals, and if the weighted signal is greater than some threshold value, then it'll fire and send the signal out. Now, this is something which was known to biologists and medical doctors as of 1938. In 1958, Rosengart, a computer scientist and a mathematician, used the same concept to say, we'll create these artificial neurons, which are shown on the right side, with the same kind of a property. He did not call them artificial neurons. He called them perceptrons at that time in 1958. They came to be called artificial neurons in 1986. So again, a key is the following, that any of these circles that you see has the same characteristics. It's connected to other circles or other neurons, artificial neurons in the previous layer. There is a weight on the edge between the two neurons. And if the first, let me show actually, if you can see my cursor, if this neuron fires, then this weight gets multiplied by the firing. Similarly, if this neuron gets fired, the weight gets multiplied, and this will fire if the sum of the weight signals is greater, just like the human neuron or a neuron in the rat or a mouse. Yeah, and unfortunately, again, we're talking 1958. Semiconductors were not even discovered, invented at that time. So these were working. Rosenblatt was working with only vacuum tubes, which are essentially incandescent bulbs with air taken out. Yeah, he was only, because of this, he was experimentally only able to create neurons of this kind, which had only one layer in between, connected to the inputs and connected to the outputs. And he was not able to prove much. Russians or Soviet people from Moscow, actually a professor and his graduate student, said theoretically, yes, we know we cannot do it practically, but theoretically, there is no reason why we should have only one layer. So they showed many layers, and not only layers, unlike the previous one, they even said neurons can be connected backwards and forwards, just like human neurons are. And these got to be called multi-layered perceptrons, except although they converted their thesis from Russian to English, pretty much the entire world forgot about it for 60 years and was reinvented in 1986 as deep learning networks. So basically, these multi-layer perceptrons have many layers, unlike this one, which has only one layer. So when you hear the word deep learning network, deep is not because they think deep. Actually, we do not know how they think. But deep is, if it has only one layer in the middle, then it's called shallow. If it is more than one layer, it is a deep learning network of 2 layers of depth equals 2. Now, what is changing? Going back to this particular thing, when we use a deep learning network, what is happening is the following. When this output is given out that it's a face of a dog and actual output is cat, then actually there is an algorithm which goes and changes all these weights so that for the same input, which was the face of a cat, the output changes from dog to being a cat. So it's basically changes the weights of these connections to change the output accordingly. Yeah. Gradually, of course, semiconductors came around. Dr. Gordon Moore was the co-founder of Intel, and he gave a very interesting hypothesis, which became Moore's law. First, he said every year the size of a semiconductor will reduce by half, and therefore its processing power would double, and therefore its cost will also be reduced by half. After 75, he says every 2 years the cost will go down by half and the processing will double. So again, just to remind, a deep learning network with 2 hidden layers equals depth equals 2, and gradually these things could be imagined in 1985, 86, and the name got changed to deep learning networks instead of multi-layer perceptrons. Yeah. So I'm still talking about last century. What happened is that in 2000, computers became even cheaper, so you could create deep learning networks quite strongly, quite vastly, with lots and lots and lots of artificial neurons in them. And using that, in 2014, using a couple of algorithms, some of these deep learning networks were able to combine images. They were able to learn images and combine images. So this particular area of deep learning networks started being called as generative deep learning networks or generative AI, because they were certainly generating new images, because just like humans, they were taking various aspects of various images and creating new images. Here is one example. One of the painters or artists used a deep learning network called Midjourney in 2018 and created this interesting image, which was called Theatre de Opera Spatial. This is in space because although this is a portion of a traditional conventional opera, this is talking about space, and he actually won a prize. So many different algorithms are used, but the underlying network is still a deep learning network, and you train it in similarly in supervised manner. Of course, the more the network becomes larger, the more you need training data. Just like as with humans, the more the human is learning, the more the data is required by human to go through accounting or to go through computer science or medicine and so on and so on. Yeah, very similar. So again, moral of the story so far, if somebody asks you, can AI do it? Your first question is, can humans do it? And if so, how? Because if we cannot do it, then it's very unlikely that we can train our children how to do it. And because these are very much like child machines, it's very unlikely that they will be able. The next interesting or fundamental change, although these were deep learning networks, the fundamental change occurred in 2017 with a research paper coming from Google Research called Attention is All You Need. So far, going back to deep learning networks, what I showed was that each layer is only connected to the layer before it and the layer after it. That was typically what a deep learning network in 1986 to 2015 was. On the other hand, if you go back to the original notion of multi-layer perceptrons, you could have cycles, layers could be connected, ith layer could be connected not to the next layer, but layers 10 layers away, and so on and so forth. So the whole thought process, again, I'm just repeating what child machines are, and we'll go back to transformers. So the notion came from the following. Suppose you asked me, why did chicken cross the road? We're just bantering, and you asked me, why did chicken cross the road? And my answer was because it wanted to. Now, between the chicken and it, there are 4 words. And typically, deep learning networks, which were just connected between the previous layer and the following layer, were not able to put the attention on chicken and it properly because they had only minimum number of connections. On the other hand, when I said, why did the chicken cross, the answer was because it was easy to cross, then immediately you would understand and you will say road is connected to it, whereas here chicken was connected to it. Whereas humans can do it very easily, deep learning networks, the way we defined it earlier, that they were only connected to the previous layer and following layer, were not able to do it. So a new set of deep learning networks came around where the ith layer could be connected to many layers in the front and many layers in the back, potentially all the layers in the front and all the layers in the back. Now, obviously, you have increased the number of connections, and therefore you have to train much more, but that is the essence of what began to be called transformers. Yeah. So these transformers have lots in terms of edges. Now, the first transformer was created by Google, again, based on this paper in 2018. It had 175 million connections. 175 million connections. It required about 700 million words to be trained if you were training it on on language, but you can train it on other things. Where Google trained it, other than training it on language, Google also created another transformer which actually was able to figure out ways how protein will fold on itself. And we'll talk about that. That was just another example of a transformer. Now, the transformers, which are only trained on languages, are now called large language models, but they're effectively transformers with deep learning networks that have many things, but among other things, they have the ability where the ith layer is connected to many layers in the front and many layers in the back. That is what helps these networks to actually connect chicken and it, even though they are quite a few words away, or road and it, even though they are quite a few words away. Deep learning networks would have forgotten. Yeah, that's what is going behind it at an intuitive level. So, as I said, transformers, which are a category of deep learning networks, they process because they are connected to many layers in the front and back. They are not processing data in a very specific order, and they're called large language models if you are only dealing with languages, which a lot of you, I'm sure, are using GPT-4, GPT 3.5, or Gemini, or other large language. So BERT only had 175 million connections. Because of that, and I've been doing this for at least since BERT came out, we have a metric, or rather 5 metrics. We look at each new transformer or LLM come out and what is its accuracy and so on. BERT only had an accuracy of about 73 to 74%. But it gave a new avenue for companies to train on, and hence the race began. So today there are about 125 GPTs. Most of them are transformers. GPT-3, for example, rather than having 175 million, it had 175 billion parameters. It was announced in around September 2022, and that is when it began to take off. But it still represents literally 1 over 10,000, 100,000 of the data in English on worldwide. GPT-4 consists of 8 GPT-3s or GPT 3.5s in various ways. Nobody really knows for sure, but that's the general belief. And it has about 1.6 trillion connections or edges. Yeah. To train on these 1.6 trillion edges, you need about 8 trillion words to train on. Just for our understanding, a typical page is about 600 words. So you need about, even a billion pages will only give you 600 billion words. You need about, roughly speaking, 8 trillion. So you can see how many pages it is being trained on. Yeah. But let's just look at what humans have. We have 86 billion neurons, and our connections are about 1,000 trillion, not even 1.6 trillion, 1,000 trillion connections. And a typical human memory can save about 250 million gigabytes of data. That's what a typical human is in terms of having a brain and nervous system has. And if we were to create today, if we were to create a GPT or an LLM of this size, it will require roughly $25 trillion to train, which is approximately the same as GDP of United States in 2022. Currently, I think our GDP is around $30 trillion. Yeah. So, but still, human brain has much more that we can do with GPTs. Maybe in 20 years we'll get there. Maybe we'll require something entirely different, because we all know today that it's not only that the simple notion of a neuron or 86 billion neurons, but also the fact that we have chemicals and these neurons are working in 6 different frequencies in our brains. None of that has been taken into it. So, but nevertheless, these, as I said, you folks, I'm sure are using GPTs of various kinds, large language models. You can ask questions. They're trained on a significant amount of data. Imagine a kid or a person being trained on 1 billion pages of data. If the person does not go mad, the person would probably know a lot of information, will have a lot of information and knowledge, depending on how much he or she is able to store in the brain. So today we are using it in computer science and in other areas. Customers can ask personalized questions, and you can basically can answer some of them it has been trained on. It can tutor students on very simple things, not easily math, because it's not trained that much on math, but more on text. But it can enable you to write recommendation letters, summarization, it can answer questions. So many good things it can do. Provide specific information about individual companies, summarize reports, and so on. Communicate insights to salespeople, communicate insights about a specific customer. If they have enough information about me, then it will communicate insights about me also. Now, of course, they're only trained on internet data, so they may have limited information about me or almost no information about me, in which case a GPT or an LLM cannot answer any. What they're not that good on, and companies are trying to improve, they're mainly trained on text. And as I said, large language models, they're not trained that much on tables, charts, spreadsheets, etc. Nor are they trained on forms and figures. If you have flow charts describing how a process flow works, they're not trained, and therefore they usually fail. So that's one of the failures that these large language models and GPTs have. Another one is it's fairly easy to actually fool them. They're quite brittle. For example, even with deep learning networks, this was a paper in 2017 from Carnegie Mellon. This particular author, which you see on the left side, she wore psychedelic glasses, and the deep learning network said it was Brad Pitt. On the left side, which is even more concerning, some people put graffiti on stop sign and it could not recognize the stop sign. Now imagine a deep learning network being used in driverless cars where it's supposed to stop and it can't recognize stop sign. That's one of the problems that in general deep learning networks have. GPTs and LLMs have even bigger problems. So GPTs, of course, in general, can even read at least or understand part of images. So a very typical question, if suppose I ask you, what is distinctive about the roof of MIT building? Now, if you have seen it, it's quite distinctive because the roof has a dome, which is like a cathedral dome. So if you have seen it in a picture or you have actually seen it, the likelihood is you will remember it. If you are into pranks, the interesting part is MIT undergrads some years ago put a full-bodied fire truck on top of the roof overnight. Nobody still knows how they did it. It was a full-bodied fire truck. Most likely they put it together. They could not have brought a crane to put it up there. And those who follow some of these pranks done by MIT undergrads and Caltech undergrads may know it. But if you did not know about it, you'll say, I don't know. So one of my friends who was a CTO of CancerLink, Anil Nair, was leaving CancerLink. He called me in September 2022. GPT 3.5 had just come out, September, October. And I told him, yeah, they hallucinate. He says, really? Can we give a question? So we gave the question, what is distinctive about the roof of MIT building? And the answer was, there is nothing distinctive. It's made of glass. Clearly, I mean, you don't expect, even though it's trained on 1 billion pages, you don't expect it to remember that. Humans probably may not remember it. But it's made out of nowhere. It's made of grass. And as we know, MIT is in the Boston area where grass hardly grows on the floor because 8 months a year it's really cold. It cannot be made of grass. It'll leak. Second time, so Anil was quite embarrassed and said, let's ask again. And it said, Nothing distinctive, it's made of red clay tiles. So this is hallucinations is one of the biggest problems GPTs have and LLMs have today. They make things out of nowhere. And actually, if somebody tells you that their LLM does not hallucinate, you should look at it very carefully because most likely the person is selling you snake oil. Anybody who can solve the machine hallucination problem today will win an Alan Turing Award, which is equivalent of a Nobel Prize being given in computer science. We really do not know how deep learning networks think. We do not know how humans think, for that matter. We don't even know how deep learning networks think. They're unexplainable and hence a big problem for medical doctors because you can't explain what the answer was. And therefore, we don't even know why they hallucinate. Another aspect, Falcon 40B is another GPT or a large language model with 40 billion parameters, very well known. So we asked the following, which of the following is a mammal? Snake, eagle, dolphin, frog. Now, the first time it very nicely gave the correct answer, it's dolphin. But for the same question 15 minutes later, it said all of the animals listed are mammals except for the eagle. Eagles are birds. So hallucination continues to be a very big problem in this area. But because these GPTs or LLMs are trained on 1 billion pages, they have read 1 billion pages worth of English text or English, Arabic, and other languages text, they are fluent in English. They really write well. And therefore, we call it machine endearment because on one hand, they could be hallucinating, but they could fool you because they're writing so. And people have been fooled, even lawyers have been fooled, which I talk about in the book. I won't go into much of the detail. So much about the past and present, about AI, and some of the I would say intuitive reasoning behind machine learning networks. Again, one thing up to now, which I would request you to remember, if humans cannot solve a problem, it's very unlikely, today at least, that machine learning can solve that problem. It may be able to solve it faster, it may be able to solve it better, but solving a problem that has not been solved by and large becomes much harder for machines. And I'll talk about protein folding, where they have been able to give the output of proteins, which the bioinformaticists did not have before, because they were able to figure out patterns. But solving a fundamentally different problem is still a very hard challenge for machines as for humans. So GPTs and LLMs, how are they doing in healthcare? Not so good because they haven't been trained on that much data, and you folks have a lot of your lingo, jargon, language, which you folks learn over a period of anywhere from 4 to 40 years, and your lingo, your jargon keeps improving. That's what knowledge workers are all about. And probably medical doctors sit at really at the top of that knowledge work because your language, the way you talk, the number of clinical trials that come out and so on, language keeps improving in your field. Happens the same in computer science to a certain extent, in accounting to a certain extent, but still much less than in medicine. So in medRxiv, there was a recent paper which came from Stanford University. And what it said was that, look, people, first of all, have not studied these GPTs, LLMs. So let's forget about the fact that you can write good recommendation letters using a GPT. Let's forget about the fact that I can ask, hey, I have a 10-year-old, his birthday is coming up tomorrow, what can I do? And I can give some interesting hints to it. I want to get a clown, or I want to have rollerblade skating. Let's put all of these aside, but can we do some interesting stuff? And so far in medicine, that has been far in between and very few things. And where they have studied, very, very few areas are actually where GPTs have and LLMs have really done well. They are by and large able to do quite well with respect to question answering of medical exams, where the answer was learning by rote, so to speak. But when it comes to things like consideration of patient data that you folks have in your electronic medical records, Epic and Cerner, etc. This paper actually showed that these LLMs and GPTs, by and large, do not work well. And if you go further into, and I'm talking about internal medicine, general medicine, right? And if you go into more deeper areas like surgery, ophthalmology, neuro-ophthalmology, nuclear medicine, their accuracy continues to fall even further right now. That's right now. I mean, 5 years later, there may be companies which are just training on that, and they may deploy maybe 100 medical doctors to infuse the medical lingo or medical jargon in there. Things may change, but as of today, very little progress in this area. So, uh, one area which also came out in a different study, because of the fact, as I said, that GPTs are trained on about 1 billion pages, general view was that GPTs actually are more empathetic towards patients. When a survey was taken from patients, GPTs versus or LLMs versus medical doctors, and patients generally said that they were 195 random patients, and they said that LLMs generally tend to be more empathetic. Now, one can look at it in both directions. Probably medical doctors, I mean, how can a particular medical doctor and oncologist be empathetic when he or she has to tell the family that the patient is a stage 4 colon cancer patient and may not live very long? Kind of hard to give that particular statement out with empathy. But anyway, that's an interesting. You can call it a silver lining, or you can call it a dark lining, as you. One place where GPTs did very well, which I was talking about protein folding, which was that out of the 4,800 proteins, most of these were already how they fold in a cell. As you well know, when a cell produces a new protein, it comes out in a linear chain. But because of the ions there, it could be a hydroxide ion, it could be a hydrogen ion, or other ions, they gradually fold themselves. And that folding has to be perfect. If it folds too much or too little or imperfectly, then the cell will burst. And very soon you could have a very, very strong disease that the person may get if the fold doesn't occur properly. So this is something which has been going on for a long time. This AlphaFold 2, which was produced by Google DeepMind, was a GPT. They eventually won a $3 million award because they were able to fold, because AlphaFold 2 was able to fold many more proteins than were known before. And in fact, Google did not say in 2020 how they were doing it. So University of Washington in Seattle, those guys created their own. I mean, this was a lab in biology or bioinformatics. They created their own GPT, or rather a transformer called Rosetta Fold, which fold another set of proteins which were somewhat distinct from AlphaFold 2. So this is one example. Other examples are in gene editing and CRISPR, which I'm sure all of you folks know. It can actually, the problem with CRISPR is often when the RNA is set with the enzyme to cut the particular virus or cut a particular strand, it may go to the wrong place. So AI or machine learning is now training the system so that the system can now go to the right place to cut. And it has improved improved the accuracy of on-target cutting of the virus or of the DNA properly. So these are some of the areas that are happening in cutting, in improving CRISPR, which will, of course, will be the next important technology in medicine and in biology, etc. Let me give you other examples where AI is being used. Some coming from GPTs, most of them not coming from GPTs. yes, GPT is the big hype. Unfortunately, it's so much hype that just like in 1960s, the hype was so much that a movie came out, 2001: Space Odyssey, where artificial general intelligent computer was created and then it fell apart. The same is happening here. We have very, very strongly hyped situation with GPTs. But here is an intelligent pill that if a person swallows it, it will figure out how much, whether there is blood in the GI system. So it's basically checking for blood. The interesting part of it is it's actually being powered. The battery of this pill is being powered by the hydrochloric acid or the acid in the stomach itself. So this is something, another important area which is going to come up. Drug discovery, massive amount of work going on in drug discovery. There is a very interesting company based in Hong Kong in silico medicine, which is, I think, now doing basically going through clinical third stage trials with respect to one of the drugs it has. And they have seemingly 51 drugs in pipeline to produce using AI. And some of it is actually using GPTs. This one, which is going through clinical phase 3 trials, is regarding treating pulmonary fibrosis. In drug discovery, there is a lot of repurposing the drugs, whether the same drug can be used for other areas where AI is helping, where a lot of research is going on. Figuring out whether two drugs can, figuring out the toxic effects and figuring out other aspects of whether two drugs will together, whether they will act beneficially or hurt the patient. Toxicity I talked about. A lot of other cases are in hospitals, which people are beginning to explore. And within the next 5 to 7 years, this will become, in my view, from a small wave or a small trickle to a fairly big tsunami, which would be to basically schedule your equipment, EEG equipment, MRI equipment, your operation theaters, scheduling nurses, other healthcare workers, which we are all short of pretty much around the world, not only in the US, and so on, doctors. This optimal scheduling is something which is already beginning to happen. It's going to happen a lot. This does not require GPT. It requires other algorithms in AI and machine learning. Another one is, of course, we cannot not talk about it, is examining medical images to detect skin cancer, tooth decay, pigmentation, to detect, of course, skin cancer, breast cancer, and others. This is almost at the level of human recognition. And probably if you use it as a decision support system, that it can do most of the work, and then a radiologist comes and checks it off, it will improve. The combination will have better accuracy than the radiologist himself or herself. Another good area where it's being followed, and there are lots going on. For example, there is sensors which now are put in patients' beds. So if patient is getting up, then it would alert the nurse that the patient is going to get up, because as we know, elderly patients and disabled fall, and that is one of the biggest problems. So there is at least 100 use cases. And by the way, if you folks are interested in knowing more use cases about healthcare, please go to the site. I will put it on chat, where there is a full section on it. So scryai.com/use cases. And there are at least 90 use cases of this kind that we discussed there in various sections. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that may be the last slide. I'll just double check that I am not missing anything. So other common use cases.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. I'll introduce Dr. Belamkonda Kishore from University of Utah to be the moderator, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Katula and Dr. Kishore. Thank you.
Dr. Katula,
Yes, sir.
you want to give us concluding mark?
Yes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do the moderation, and then we'll do the concluding mark after the question.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. That was really informative and enlightening to us, and you really brought a lot of issues which we are not aware of. And there are quite a number of questions, and I will just read them after another. Okay, there's some more issues. This is from Dr. Girish. How much you think the heat mapping strategies can explain the DNN? I don't know what is DNN.
DNN is same as deep learning network. They're often called deep neural networks also. Very little. So there is a lot of research. As I said, these networks are not explainable. We do not know. I mean, when they give an answer, by and large, I mean, if a network after it's trained, it says that the answer is 90% correct on faces of dogs versus cat, and you give an answer that this is a face of cat and it's correct, and you say, why did you say so? It will not be able to tell us, nor can we figure it out. And the heat maps can basically answer questions about one or two variables, how they are being used by the network. But overall, if there were 100 variables, which is a very common thing in real life, I mean, you folks live every day in your business, what all could affect the patient, what caused the cancer, how do you treat it, and so on. These kinds of heat maps fail miserably. I mean, but there have been literally, this is a very big area of research in computer science. Pretty much all good universities that you can think of would have at least 3 or 4 researchers in computer science working in this area.
Thank you. The next question is from Dr. Mahadeva Pahanasikati. Can you comment on AI/ML enabled medical devices currently approved by the FDA? Are they inaccurate?
First of all, like humans, I mean, again, I go back to child machines, humans. Look, humans are inaccurate too. I mean, with all due respect, medical doctors are inaccurate. So, I mean, we are the ones who are mainly training these systems. So yes, they are inaccurate. The question is, how inaccurate are they? And are we as humans willing to take their inaccuracy? So FDA is currently approving various AI systems and intelligent pills and so on, which are inaccurate. Typically, they are approving it, and they don't give, FDA is not giving thresholds as to what inaccuracy they're willing to accept. But the important part is once you have trained it, you cannot retrain the system. If you retrain that system again, then you have to go to FDA for further approval. So if the data changes, obviously you will have to train. I mean, you folks as doctors, your data changes, your mind retrains itself to think of the new things that you recently learned. In FDA case, you have to go and ask it for a reapproval of that pill or of that AI system.
So they can be recalls also.
Yes, and
it can be recalls also. Okay, the next question is Dr. Ravi Kohli.
By the way, which is still better than financial institutions. I mean, unfortunately, the US financial institutions like SEC, Securities Exchange Commissions, and Consumer Financial Protection Board still do not accept AI systems because they're unexplainable. Yeah. But FDA at least has gone, I would say, made a very big leap in this regard, which is very good for patients, doctors, healthcare workers alike. Sorry, next question. You were saying.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions. Dr. Ravi Kohli, so will drug discovery be faster and more economical with more advances in LLM, etc.?
Yes. The general belief is, at least for small molecules, this will reduce. And this is just hypothesis, and people have done the analysis. So only the proof will be in the pudding. But the general belief is that for small molecule drug discovery, will reduce the time and the cost by a factor of 2. I mean, currently, most of these drugs which are finally approved are about $1.4, $1.5 billion. And the hope is for at least small molecules, it will reduce it to about 600 to 700 million, which is quite a big savings and also in time.
Yeah.
This has to get improved, of course. This is all on paper.
Next is, can you elaborate more, Dr. Bhavani Adapa? Can you elaborate more on how AI is helping in evaluating medical images?
Yes,
I think you covered it a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, so I covered a bit, but this area is a very, very strong area there. And I personally, even though I'm not in medicine, I'm personally very, I would say, very excited of this area because don't look at it replacing radiologists. I think that is where things go wrong, that, oh, this will replace radiologists. Think of it as a decision support system which will help radiologists. So it figures out a particular area. Radiologists may think, or two radiologists may not believe, even agree with each other, whether it is something to think about or not. That's why you have tumor boards and so on. This could be your assistant where it could help a radiologist saying, hey, you may want to think about this portion of the MRI scan and so on. And there are special kind of scans which are very interesting, where radiologists do not tend to agree on it, and machines tend to help. In, I believe, one of the areas is colon cancer scans. So this is going to be a very big area in the coming future, which will help the human society, but help doctors. And I think the fear about people losing jobs is overbloated.
I think it's. I think we are already seeing the advantage with the Google retinal camera. It is enhancing our ability. It's not taking away anything. The next question is Sunil, Dr. Sunil Tamana. Great lecture. How can we know when in future you have multiple LLM, which one is better to choose from? Choice.
That's a hard one, right? I mean, I'll pose the same question with respect to cars. I mean, so many models of cars come out literally on a monthly basis. How do I know which car is doing well? Because as a human, I mean, you and I, we are two different people and we may have different parameters how we'll choose a particular car model. So right now with LLMs, I mean, jokes aside, it's no different than models of cars coming out, electric vehicle models coming out. They're just improving on each other very so slightly. They're kind of more or less getting saturated. But some may be better in one area, another may be better in another area. And that's where you will have to go and look at, just like you would look in car models, there are companies which are doing this analysis on a daily basis. I think here you have some of the companies which are beginning to come and give analysis. A good place to go is Hugging Face. I will write it out.
Yeah. The only problem is I think physicians are dealing with patients, so they are more concerned about which model to use.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
may be the problem.
And that's not an easy thing. By no means this is going to be, going forward, it is going to be a hard problem because you're not buying a car. Here you are worried about patients' life. I mean, whether the patient, first of all, will survive or die, or what will be the quality of life and so on. So, but it's a hard problem. I mean, the question is a very good one. I don't have a good answer, and the problem is a hard problem.
The next question from Dr. Mahadeva Pahanaskati. CADT devices, can they be used in real life practice, any real world data, or they're more useful in less resourceful developing countries?
So I think right now, many of these are more are being more used in less developed countries because they're cheaper in some sense, and but they're also less accurate. So it's hard to figure out whether we would have these kind of devices being used in US, and the accuracy is not as much. But as compared to a place where India, which is in a growing economy, in a village, you may want to use some of these devices with low accuracy, but because they're cheaper and there are no doctors in many of these villages still.
So the next question is from Naren Kumar, Dr. Naren Kumar. Why AI in medicine companies are mushrooming all over? Is it hype, and any hype has to taken with pinch of salt? In radiology, it has been said that it is very helpful in diagnosis. And Dr. Ravi Kul also has more or less similar views expressed about hype.
Yeah. So rather than a pinch of salt, I would say don't take it with a grain of salt, but with a handful of salt. And so, yes, like any, I mean, that's why I talk about in the book, the fourth industrial revolution. Hype has been part of all industrial revolutions.
Technology, yeah.
That technology is hype. I mean, you go back 5 years, self-driving cars were extremely hyped. They, in fact, Waymo's valuation, which is Google's sister company, its valuation in 2017, according to Morgan Stanley, was 1.75 times the total valuation of General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford combined. Yeah. And now it, of course, has fallen down to 10% of the original valuation. The same was true about AI in 1960s. People thought they would create an artificial general intelligence computer, which would have all emotions and all that. Even the movie got made where HAL 9000 is the AGI, the artificial general intelligence computer, and it fell apart. So yes, not only should you take it with a grain of salt, or you said pinch of salt, I would say you should take it with a handful of salt. That's what I do at least.
Yeah, I understand. You know, there are still people who think that ambassador car is still the best car we ever had. Dr. Deepak Takhtani, what problems does the panel, I think he's talking about some panels that regulate this, think could arise as a more LLM use cases are implemented? What problems the panels think?
Sorry, what is the panelist? I'm sorry.
I think he is referring to the panels. If suppose you want to introduce an AI into the medicine and practice, there are some panels that will evaluate apart from the FDA. The medical community, you know, every institute or universities have panels to see whether it is good or not. I think that's what he means. Is it? Am I right?
Yeah, probably we have to unmute him. I think he's talking about the panel here. What do you think? What problems does the panel think could arise as more LLM used?
A lot of problems will arise right now. One is, as I mentioned, the biggest problem is hallucinations, right? I mean, what if the LLM hallucinates and makes up a disease that the patient did not have? So hallucination is a very fundamental problem, especially in healthcare. I mean, it's also a problem in military, in defense, but I think healthcare, it's the biggest problem. And we are already seeing in legal arena that even lawyers have been fooled by LLMs. So that's one big problem that will arise, which panels will have to think about. Others will be ethics. I mean, because eventually, again, let's look at child machines, right? We are training our own children, so we bias our children the way we think. You can call it Sanskriti, you can call it value system, you can call it bias. They are all various aspects of the same coin. Various faces. So the bottom line is, especially because we do not know how to explain these systems or interpret these systems, that's a very, very hard problem. And therefore, this is not going to be, in my view, it's nowhere close to FDA even allowing LLMs right now to just go on its own and give diagnosis. Now, as medical doctors, you can always ask an LLM to give and then make your own judgment call. Whether it was right, whether it was wrong, whether it told you something which you did not know, or whether it is completely smoking something which is not grass because it cannot smoke grass. So I think these are interesting questions, but I don't think we are anyway close to being adopting LLMs in medicine where panels get involved. People will just freak out. Medical doctors will freak out for the right reasons.
Thank you. Dr. Madhavi Chindur is asking, there are AI algorithms for arrhythmias. Is asking whether there are any algorithms for arrhythmias detection, which
Oh,
are
yes.
approved by the FDA.
FDA approval, I do not know. There are definitely, I think there was University of Pittsburgh did a research study on it. There are definitely AI systems. I do not know their accuracy, and I frankly do not know. Can go and look at it if you send me an email. It's alok.agarwal with 2 G's at spryai.com. I would be happy to find it for you. Now, you've piqued my curiosity also. I do know that there are algorithms, reasonably accurate algorithms to detect arrhythmias. I do not know whether they're improved by.
Thank you. Dr. Mahadevappa Hunaskati, he works for the FDA, I know. Can you help me to understand devices who use AI versus ML? How can I understand the difference with the real life examples?
Yes, very, very good question. So what is the fundamental, and I should have covered this, unfortunately ran out of time. Very good question. What is the difference between machine learning and AI? What I mainly talked about today was machine learning, because it was being, we were training these artificial neural networks. What AI adds on top of it is the subject matter expertise. So put machine learning and say you have a subject matter expertise, let's say in cancer, or cancer may be too strong or too much of subject matter expertise, but let's say even very simple subject matter expertise of COVID. You doctors have a lot of subject matter expertise. If COVID happens, what are the side effects and so on and so forth? Many of this, we don't have data to train machine learning algorithms on. So you can infuse that subject matter expertise into your system and combine the subject matter expertise with your machine learning algorithm, whether it's an LLM or just a deep learning network, and create something better. Now, again, we are not in the healthcare area, but we do work a lot in banking, and we use a lot of banking subject matter expertise to infuse with machine learning models and LLMs to create better models.
Thank you. Says Dr. Narendra Singh, can we use AI for PPT? I think it's PowerPoint presentation.
To create PowerPoint, it's still in the early stages. You can definitely create images. It is also beginning to understand PowerPoint presentations, and you can ask questions if you're giving the PowerPoint presentations. Suppose you take a PowerPoint presentation about an area. Again, subject matter expertise means a lot here, because it could have a lot of jargon which the AI would not know, which an LLM would not know. But we are in, again, given that we are in banking, we have infused machine learning and subject matter expertise, and our system understands PowerPoint presentations, which may be about how well a company is doing, should the company's stock value go up or down. You can understand those. And in 5-7 years, this will be commonplace. Again, I am a bit hesitant in stating these things in healthcare, because the amount of knowledge that you folks have in healthcare is enormous. I mean, this was the reason why IBM Watson failed so miserably. They did not realize how much knowledge is there in the healthcare business. I mean, and there is no knowledge, and there is knowledge that we do not know, where we say, okay, I do not know how genomics or proteomics work in this area, and so on and so forth. So healthcare is, I would say, a level even deeper in some sense. That doesn't mean AI cannot help. I gave you 6 or 8 use cases, and there are at least 60 to 70 more on our website. But it's some of the harder problems will occur in healthcare with respect to medicine.
Thank you. There are only a couple of questions there. Excellent talk is by Dr. Inamdar. Excellent talk. Thank you. What is tokenization in AI, and how does it tie in with the DLN?
Okay, so deep learning networks. So as I said, LLMs are part of deep learning networks. So think of tokenization in human terms as follows. Even for a human, if you give me too much data in one shot, I won't be able to process it, right? You suppose ask me to read 10 pages in let's say a second, or I will say, come on, man, I'm not I'm not God. You say, okay, read 10 pages in a minute, then also I'll kind of freak out. So there is only so much I can absorb in a second or a minute. The number of words that I can absorb or number of tokens, which are like, I mean, it's a computer science jargon for words, I would say, that a system can absorb and understand is called tokenization. So, for example, a particular large language model may be able to accept and understand 4,000 words in one shot. Another may be able to understand 400, another may be able to understand 8,000. So if there is only, it can only understand 400 words in one shot, and your entire book has, let's say, 80,000 words, you'll have to break up into groups of 400 words each. And that is what tokenization is. Breaking up into chunks. So you can call it chunking, you can call it tokenization, but that's where it basically comes from. But I don't think from your perspective, very honestly, I don't think, other than knowing that, look, you can't give too many words for a human to understand in one shot. Similarly, you can't give too many tokens for an LLM to understand. I don't think you need to go much deeper into it, because pretty much all LLMs will tell you how many tokens it is willing to accept.
There's one last question by Dr. Radhika Rajasekar. An AI-based system, I mean, can an AI-based system be used as medical scribes? Like the notes, scribes like notes taken
yes.
During the, clinical work.
Yes. So again, a very good question. And although we are not in this, this particular question comes up again and again. And the reason it is somewhat inefficient or inaccurate is because of the amount of knowledge you folks have and jargon you folks have. So your ICD-10, for example, coding has a lot of jargon. So it doesn't do as well in medical transcription as it would do well in legal transcription or call center transcription. It does extremely well in call center transcription because the amount of jargon is much less. But I mean, you could be talking while you're writing notes or doing transcription. It'll understand all the words quite well, but then you suddenly throw in a new drug that has come out, and it'll like a new name that it has found. It'll probably fail on those.
Yeah, I mean, there are some used already, like Nuance company, they have AI, and there are two.
So all of these are doing that. The accuracy in medical goes down much more than in other areas because of the jargon that.
I think they'll get better with as more data comes in.
Absolutely, like humans, right? I mean, again, I will go back to child machines. The more data you have, the more data you provide to a human, the better the human becomes. The more data you provide to transcription facilities, the better your supervised learning model becomes.
I got a question, because if I don't ask any question, they'll think that I'm a dumb moderator. Those of us who are in academics, our concern is how to prepare the next generation of physicians to deal with the AI. And until now, there's nothing going on in the medical curriculum to prepare for that.
Yeah,
it's an unfortunate situation. We got the MD, MBA course to train the executives, but not something to train the students in the AI, and they are looking desperately into ChatGPT and other things. And what do you suggest how we can deal with this thing? I think people don't have clues to be.
Yeah, I think this is and this is not only a problem in medicine. I think this is a problem for all graduate students worldwide. How do you train them? Because 2 or 3 things that are happening. One is the amount of information about AI is often wrong. I mean, somebody talked about pinch of salt, and I said handful of salt. So that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, and I'm planning on converting it into a 3-credit course next year into basically 40 lectures of 35 to 40 minutes each, so that people can, and it's not going to be just like my today's talk, it's not going to have any math in it, because people should at least know the basics of AI and where it can be used, and equally importantly, where it cannot be used today. And I think we do need to spend more time on training our students, because it is going to be very fundamental for the next generation. I mean, today we can talk about, hey, you should have a decision, a radiologist should have a decision support system to help him or her. Tomorrow, the patients will ask the radiologist, sir, are you using AI to help you out? Because I hear that it has very good accuracy, so why are you not using it? And day after tomorrow, it could even be malpractice not to use AI, because it helps you. If it improves your accuracy by 2%, then why not use it? Right? So I think this is going to be a very, and given my background as a researcher and teaching at MIT, I do think about next generation all the time. And I think what you said, Dr. Kishore, is one of the most fundamental things that universities, professors need, and researchers need to look at. And that was part of the reason of writing the book, which I'll follow up with the second version and have exercises and create video lectures. I think this is incumbent on our generation to ensure that the next generation is taught well.
Thank you. If I missed any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, I think we can stop it here.
Okay.
Why it's been a very interactive session, and thank you, Dr. Agarwal.
Thank you very much.
Being here.
Yeah, happy to give more talks depending on what you want. I know Dr. Kishore has asked for me to write an article, which I will. I have to write an article for a computer science journal. After that, I'll take it very, very closely to my heart and write one for you folks.
Thank you.
Also. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agarwal, for an excellent talk, and we learned a lot today. And Dr. Amit Govil for being the chair and suggesting this topic, and also Dr. B.K. Kishore for moderating the event. And all the attendees who stayed till now, it's 26 minutes past the time, but still you are there because of excellent questions and answers. And now it's time to honor our speaker. Ms. Vijay, can you put the clock, virtual clock we have for Dr. Agarwal?
Okay. Thank you so much. Very nice. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Physicians of Indian origin recognizes Dr. Alok Agarwal, PhD, for his outstanding contributions in the field of artificial intelligence and welcomes him as a member of API Distinguished Speakers Club. Satish Kathula, API President, Amit Govil, Chair, API CME Committee. Thank you so much, Dr. Agarwal, and thanks.
Thank you. I'm humbled and honored.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. This was so great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, please don't forget to get your CME credits. Use